tell you something. If you could have seen my face last night, I did not look like a human being. I mean, I look a lot better now that I've been stitched up and that I've been cleaned off and that people cleaned me for, an hour and said it's the best we could do. But, last night you couldn't see any of the skin on my face. You could see nothing but blood on my face. From top to bottom, my face was covered in blood. And it was just a bloody mess. Now, before I get into the sermon, I'm just going to explain to you what happened to me last night. Because, I feel like I ought to just explain that. Most of the people here already know. Some people do not. And so that way you're not wondering about it throughout the sermon. That way you can listen to the sermon instead of wondering about what happened. Let me just explain what happened. Last night I was driving, and this is the truth. This is the gospel truth of what happened. And you know what? It's on videotape because there were all kinds of cameras around when this happened, and so it's all on videotape. And so the truth is the truth. It's documented. This is what happened. Last night I was driving back from work late. I'd been working in San Diego, and I'd been over there for a couple days, and I was on my way back. And I was driving back, and it was about 9:30, 9:45 around there. And I was coming out of Yuma. I was about 70 miles out of Yuma, heading toward Phoenix on the Interstate 8. And, I got stopped at one of these, Border Patrol checkpoints. Of course, I wasn't crossing a border. I was just on Interstate 8, just minding my own business, trying to get home from work. I was tired. I'd been up since, 5:30 in the morning working. And I was going down this freeway, and I got stopped at this checkpoint, federal agents, Border Patrol, and, they stopped me, and all of a sudden they're saying, right away they're saying, where are you coming from? They were asking me, what do you do for a living? They wanted to search my car, and they began to ask me all these questions. Well, there's something in America called the Bill of Rights.
Right.
Okay?
Amen.
The Fourth Amendment says that warrants for searches have to be upon probable cause. I mean, I can't just be searched just randomly, without a warrant, without probable cause, just because I'm driving down the road, coming home from work, minding my own business. There's another amendment to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the Fifth Amendment, which says, and it's been interpreted by the Supreme Court over and over again, that says I have the right to remain silent, not just when I'm under arrest, but I do not have to answer questions about, where I'm going, what I do for a living, where I'm, what's happening, and so forth. Well, I basically invoked my Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. And I sat in the car. It was kind of a showdown where they basically kept pushing me and saying, you must pull into the inspection area and be inspected. Your car is going to be searched. And it's amazing because when I first got there, they're saying, you're not answering questions, you're not cooperating, you're going to secondary, this and that. Well, that wasn't working. I wasn't going to secondary. Well, then they bring a dog over. The dog sniffs the car. The dog did not bark. The dog did not make a peep. The dog made no sign. It just came over and sniffed it and walked away. And they said, our dog has just detected either drugs or a human being in your car. That's what they said. There's either drugs or a human being. That's the way our dog is trained. Now we have probable cause. Now you must let us search it. I said, wait a minute. What does that mean that the dog detected? What does the dog do? What did the dog bark? What did it do? They wouldn't tell me. They took the dog away. I never saw that dog again. They took that dog away. I asked for that dog to be brought back out so that they could show me what the dog is doing to indicate to them that something is in my trunk or something's going on. Anyway, I sat there, I waited, and they just had me detained, for not letting them search me and for not telling them what my laptop was for was one of the questions they asked, what I do for a living, where I work, where I live, this and that. And 10 minutes into this, I told them I'm a U.S. citizen. About 10 minutes into it or so. I said, I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm coming back from work. I'm minding my own business. I don't have drugs. There's no body in my trunk. There's no, Jorge is not in my trunk right now trying to get across the border or whatever. And we weren't even crossing a border. We're just driving in the United States from San Diego to Phoenix. And so, waiting. They're harassing me, laughing at me, mocking me, whatever. We exchanged some words. And, it went back and forth. Well, the DPS shows up, which is basically the Arizona Highway Patrol. They show up, and they say, you're under arrest to me. They said, you're under arrest because you're not allowing these people to search you, and they have probable cause. I said, wait a minute, officer. I said, you weren't here. This did not happen. I said, they got upset at me because I wouldn't answer questions. Then the dog thing came up, And, they won't bring the dog out and repeat it. I said, officer, please. I said, they're lying. Will you please just ask them to bring the dog out? And let's see this once and for all, whether they're telling the truth. So they, the DPS officer says to the federal agents, can we get the dog out? And they said no. So anyway, they told me, well, you're coming out of this car whether you like it or not. You're going to be searched whether you like it or not. We're going to search this car one way or another. They said if we have to break into the car, we'll do it. So here's what happened. The DPS officer comes over to my passenger window. I'm sitting in the driver's side. He goes to the passenger window. He's got a hammer and some kind of a tool, and he was kind of tapping on the window, acting like he was getting ready to make an impact and break through the window. And so he's kind of tapping at it and doing this and that. And so basically they're saying, hey, we're going to break your window, cover your eyes, watch out for glass, we're going to break this window. Well, I didn't see anything going on to my left. There wasn't anything going on. He just kept tapping on that right window, getting it ready. Well, they said, cover your eyes. I put my hands over my face like this. I leaned forward into my lap, to protect my face because I knew they were going to break out my window. So I leaned forward, covered my face, and all of a sudden, not just that window broke. Out of nowhere, a hammer hits the driver window 6 inches from my head. And that window, at the same time, they're both blown out. Okay? So picture me with my face in my lap, my head in my hands, both windows blow out, and at that moment, I'm shot with tasers. Now, wait a minute. Why? I was not resisting. I was not struggling. I was not fighting. I had my face in my hands and my lap, defenseless, and they shot me with tasers. And by the way, when you're shot with a taser, I'm an expert on this now because I was shot repeatedly with a taser, again and again and again, even though I was not resisting. When you get shot with that taser, you're paralyzed. You cannot move. You cannot control your body. I was shot with it, and my hand moved away from my face, and I could not bring it to my face again. I was just, screaming in pain. Just, And I wasn't shot with one. I'm saying they were shooting me repeatedly with these. I don't know. I don't think they're designed to be shot more than one at somebody like that. But they just shot them at me. Well, a Border Patrol agent, I'm paralyzed. I'm in excruciating pain. A Border Patrol agent grabs my head and shoves it into the place where the broken window just was. Because they busted out my driver's window. He takes my head and shoves it against that window, and guess what? I could feel the glass just cutting into my brow and just stabbing into my head and just cutting into my flesh as he just shoved my head against that door. Now, a little bit passed, and I'm thrown on the ground. And my face was in a pile of glass and blood, and a Federal Border Patrol agent put his foot on top of my head with his boot, stepped down with all of his force. I could feel a lot of force on my head, and shoved my face down into that glass. And while his foot was on my head, shoving me into glass, they kept tasing me again and again. Because this went on. I don't know how long, because to me it seemed like an eternity, okay, when you're in that kind of pain. And I'll just share with you quickly what my thoughts were while this was happening, okay? These were just the thoughts that were going through my mind. Of course, when the windows blew out and when I got hit with the taser, I didn't know I was being tased because I just couldn't imagine that they would do that. What I thought is that maybe one of the hammers had hit my elbow, shattered my elbow, and that maybe, because that's where it seemed to be radiating from. And so I thought maybe my elbow was shattered and that my body was going into some kind of a shock just from extreme pain from being hit in the elbow. And so then I started to realize, okay, I'm being tased right now. They're electrifying me right now with the extreme voltage. And so I was, shoved into the thing. And you know what? When my head was shoved in that door, in the glass, I thought of Jesus. And again, not trying to draw a comparison here. Obviously, Jesus was a lot worse. But, I just thought to myself, what did Jesus go through with this beating, with this crown of thorns? And I literally, I don't know if anybody knows what this is like, but I literally, when I was on the ground writhing with these electric shocks in me, I felt like I was burning in hell. That's the way, I felt like I was on fire or something. And I just thought to myself, God, what is hell like? That's just what came. I'm just telling you the things that came to my mind. First, I thought of Jesus on the cross when I could feel the glass like stabbing into my head. I thought of the crown of thorns for a second. And then when I was, on the ground just writing, I thought, what is hell like? This is horrible. This is torture. I wish they could make this stop. And I was trying to just think, what do I have to do to get them to stop doing this to me? And I was screaming for mercy. And then I thought to myself, maybe they want me to be silent. And so then I tried silence. I was just trying to do anything to get them to stop what they were doing to me. And so and then I had a third thought. And this thought is not as spiritual as the first two. But this is the thought that came to my mind. I read a book when I was a teen, and I'm not recommending this book. It's disturbing and has some bad content. But, we had to read this when I was in school growing up, 1984 by George Orwell. Has anybody read the book? Put up your hand. It's something we had to read in school. And I remember just this popped into my mind out of nowhere as I'm laying there with this guy's boot on my face at full force. I remembered this was one of the major quotes from the book. The evil guy from the wicked 1984 government, toward the end of the book somewhere, I don't remember, but when they're torturing the main character in the book, he says, if you want, this is the quote, and this quote just flashed into my mind, right as I was being stepped on here. This quote came into my mind. If you want a vision of the future, imagine a boot stepping on a human face forever. And that's what this guy was saying, like basically promoting this totalitarian government of 1984. And that quote just flashed in my mind. And while I was being and it was a long time because I was having a lot of thought, and I was like, I dwelled on that quote for a long time. That's how long this guy's boot was shoving on my face. I just thought to myself, if you want a picture of the future, just imagine a boot stepping on a human face forever. And that's a quote from this famous book that I read as a teenager. And I tell you what, they picked me up. They brought me into the trailer where I saw all the the screens of all the cameras. I mean, they had a ton of cameras at this checkpoint, and so the footage is all on tape. I've already spoken to a lawyer. That footage is going to be in my possession of me being beaten and abused for no reason, defenseless. And I'm going to tell you, this is another parallel that made me think of Isaiah 53. They brought me in, cuffed me behind my back, set me in a chair, and they began to laugh at me. You don't believe me. They laughed at me. Yeah. It's on tape. They taped the inside of that chair. They laughed and mocked me and made fun of me. They thought it was fun. Yeah. I'm going to tell you something. Those people are inhuman. Right. They're inhuman. I mean, they thought it was fun to torture me. They thought it was fun to have me writhing on the ground. I felt like I was on fire. And they thought it was funny, and they laughed about it, and they joked about it. I mean, this is a real story. This just happened to me last night. They made fun of me. They laughed at me, and they said, if you would have just answered the question, they said, we would have let you go. Proving it had nothing to do with that dog. And they took me and threw me in the back of a squad car, treated me like a criminal, wouldn't let me use the bathroom. I was begging to use the bathroom. Had to beg and plead to finally use it after I was in just pain from not using the bathroom for hours and hours of just going through all this process. For hours and hours. They took me they booked me into the county jail like a criminal, chained up my feet, chains around my stomach, chained up my hands, treated me like I'm some kind of a murderer. And oh, by the way, they searched my car, of course. Oh boy, you better know they searched it up one side and down the other. And you know what they found? Nothing. They found nothing. You think they found drugs? No. They didn't find one blessed thing because I had tools in that car and clothing that I took out of town. And you say, well, Pastor Anderson, why don't you just go along with it? You know what? Because my freedom means something to me. And if it doesn't mean anything to you, you need to study this country. You need to understand the country you're living in. Because people in this world do not live in free societies, but thank God in America we do. And people in China today are not free. They're being forced to be sterilized. They're being forced into abortions. There's a one-child per family policy. People in Africa are starving and being oppressed by evil dictators. Hey, this world is not free. Right. But this country is free. Yes. Amen. Thank God our Bill of Rights still exists. Yeah. Thank God we have the right not to be stopped and searched for nothing. For nothing. Arrested for nothing. beaten for nothing. And I had 11 stitches. First they took me in let me finish my story. They took me in the emergency room before they booked me in the county jail. Put 11 stitches in my head, before they took me down to the county jail, booked me in jail, treated me like a criminal. I'm in some tiny cell. I don't know what's happening. They won't tell me when I'm going to go to court or what. I'm just locked. I have no concept of time. The lights are just bright. I had to, cover myself in blankets just to get a little sleep, to try to fall asleep for a little while. Treated like dirt. Then the court gives the order to release me. And you say, it'll be about 3 hours before we let you go. And then they slap the cuffs on me, and cuff me and chain me up some more and all this. And then, I'm going to court on Friday at 10 a.m. And you know what I'm going to plead? Not guilty.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I'm being charged with. 2 things. Number 1, failure to obey a legal command from a police officer. Wait a minute. Not a legal command to force me to be searched against the Fourth Amendment.
That's right.
Failure to obey. Look at my face right now. Look at this bloody mess that's already been cleaned up. I mean, it's a pretty ugly sight. Look at this filthy mess that they've done to my face and forehead, and just tell yourself, what was it that I did? I failed to obey. I failed to relinquish my rights, to just travel freely without being molested, without being harassed. This was the vision of the Founding Fathers. And I'm going to tell you something. Oh yeah, and the second charge. 2 charges. They're both misdemeanor. The second charge, blocking a public highway. Blocking a public highway! Of course, they've got the whole roadblock set up. They slowed me down, and I begged them repeatedly, can I go? Please, I just want to go home. I'm just coming back from work. Let me go. But I was blocking the highway. You better know, I spoke to a lawyer. He said, I'm right. He said, the law's on my side, and I am not guilty, my friend.
Amen.
This is the world we're living. This is the America we're living in. And you know what's funny? It's all because of 9/11. Listen to me. Listen how stupid this is for a minute. Because of 9/11, 3,100 and some people died. We must give up liberties. Wait a minute. How many people died to give us the liberties?
Right.
Because there was a lot more than 3,000.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands who've shed their blood and given their life and said, we want to preserve the United States a free country. But it only took 3,100 and some odd deaths to take away our freedom.